Hey everybody, it's Romania Black. How are we already on episode 12? I can't believe it. After this episode, we'll be at we're at the halfway point of the season right now, which is crazy. We're already here. I feel like, I don't know. Here's the thing. Y'all have told me that this anime, the season that we get of Yona the Dawn is more like a preamble. It's more like setting everything up for the rest of the manga, which kind of sucks because I want more anime. Not that I'm going to read the manga, so I'm going to see what ends up happening, but seeing it in animated form has been such a joy because they've done such a good job with it. The animation, the lighting, the choreography, everything has been so good that I'm like, why can't we have more? It reminds me, I know this season came out in 2014 into 2015, which has been like 6 or 7 years ago. And it just reminds me of like the early 2000s whenever they take a manga, specifically a shoujo usually, and they would do one season of it. I'm thinking of you, Ouran High School Host Club. I'm thinking of you, Fruits Basket, the original version. And then they just abandon it. And I'm like, but we just got to the good part. And so it's so frustrating to know that there's only one season of this show and it's been 6 or 7 years. So, the optimist in me is like, oh yeah, they'll make a second season. But the realist in me is like, it's been 7 or 8 years. So unless they like reboot it, which I don't want them to do because this version's perfect. I don't think they'll make a second season, which sucks. So luckily I'm going to be reacting and reading to the manga. So I'll get to see what ends up happening. But the fact that we're at the halfway point is kind of crazy because we've only met one of the dragons. We spent most of this first half setting up Hawk and Yona, setting up that something's not quite right with the kingdom. We don't have the full perspectives on both Yu Hong and King Il. And a lot of you have pointed out that both of them, Yona and Hawk, have a very picturesque, rosy, glass-colored, glass-tinted, rose-tinted glass view of King Il. But clearly, the other circumstances and things we're finding out about him show that he may have been a really kind man, but he wasn't a good ruler. And then the things we find about Yu Hong, Su-won has a really picturesque version of him as the ideal father in his mind, but we're learning that people were terrified of him. He might have been a little bit more aggressive and not nice than we think. So the fact that we're getting this more elaborate, complicated picture of these two characters is really neat. And we've only met one of the dragons so far, which I feel like the rest of the season is going to be meeting the other 3 dragons and setting up for them to go face Su-won. And my fear is it's going to leave on a big cliffhanger, and I'm going to be like, well, time to start the manga. So I actually have volumes 1 and 2 now. I've started volume 1, but I've not got very far into it. But so far, it's pretty much accurate to the anime. I mean, it's pretty accurate. There are a couple things, like you all said that Yona's mom has black hair. They established that in the manga early on. But for the most part, as I've gotten into it so far, there's not very much difference between the anime and the manga, which I like. So that leaves me excited because I'm eventually going to read like the first 8 volumes leading up to this series being over. And then we'll start with the volume where it's all new. And then we'll go from there. We'll do the OVAs. It'll be a lot of fun. So yeah, but I still can't believe we're at the halfway point. It's crazy. So this episode's called Blindfolded Dragon. And I'm assuming we're about to find out where the blue dragon's home is. I'm assuming we're about to get to it. I'm curious what the blindfolded bit is. I don't know. I don't know if that's tied to... Oh, another thing. Kija. So I made a note on Patreon and in the comments that I had watched episode 10 and episode 11 pretty close together before they came out on Patreon and then obviously on here on YouTube. So I had gone with what the show called him, which was Gija, but honestly, Kija is so much easier to say. The G's and J's put together, my mouth, I'm just like, Gija. It just sounds weird. I don't know why it's translated that way, but Kija makes much more sense. So thank you for that. I'll call him Kija from now on. And if there are any other translation errors, I'm sure y'all will point it out, and it may just take me an episode or 2 to catch up to them, right? But let's not waste any more time, shall we? I'm curious to know what Kija, Hawk, Yona, Yoon, what they're going to be doing this episode. It seems like they're tracking down like a migratory nomad tribe to find the blue dragon. We shall see. But in any case, we're going to start this reaction here in 3, 2, 1, and let's go. Oh my gosh, this episode. This may be one of my favorite episodes too. Oh, I have a feeling I'm really going to like the Blue Dragon. Oh my gosh, his backstory, y'all. Y'all, I can't. So, wow, okay. I love the contrast in this episode from the Blue Dragon to Kija. I love the contrast because Kija, it makes sense why Kija would be so confused because Kija's grown up his whole life where the dragons, it was a gift. For the dragon's blood was a gift that was passed down from generation to generation. And it kind of makes sense, right? It makes sense why in Kija's case, the white dragon was viewed as like a blessing, as a gift, because it's not really something it's a defensive power. It's an offensive and the dragon's claw is something that can be used to defend the village, but it's not something that the village necessarily has to be afraid of, right? It's something that's passed down from generation to generation, and it's a way of protecting the village. And they revered that. They were like, oh, this person's going to be our protector, our savior. And then when the king comes, they'll go and make us all proud and do their due diligence. So, of course, in Kija's case, the village views it as like a blessing. And so they're like worshipped basically from the time that they're born and raised up to be this great king basically of their village, their leader. And then eventually, like in Kija's case, Yona comes along and they're like, okay, you can go do the thing. Great. And the way that Kija, it all makes sense now. The way Kija described it, he's like, well, if something bad happens to me and I die, there will be a replacement born. So it's something tied to the village. Whatever village they ended up at, I don't know if maybe the original dragons made like a pact with that village or with those people and was like, no matter what is going to happen, I'm going to take root here. Whatever happens, I'm going to take root here. And the village will always have a dragon to protect it. Maybe that was something along lines, because the original dragons were basically like demigods. So maybe that's something that goes along with it. Okay. So yeah, it makes sense that over time, I like that in Kija's case, it almost seems genetic though. Like each white dragon, their child was the next white dragon. But we don't necessarily get confirmation of that. So I guess it could be like in the Blue Dragon's case where it was just someone was born in the village and they were the next dragon, whether they were their kid or not. In Kija's case, I thought it was genetic, but it may not have been. Because, well, it is genetic because that entire White Dragon's village, they're all kind of ancestral. They're all related to the White Dragon. Somehow, the White Dragon got around, basically. Can you blame him? But yeah, the Blue Dragon, we get the total opposite. In the Blue Dragon's case, it's a curse. It's something that's not revered. It's thought the exact opposite of. The people are afraid of the Blue Dragon's powers because apparently the White Dragon can use the claw to defend and, attack people. But apparently the Blue Dragon's eyes can paralyze people or kill them. He said, the old Blue Dragon said paralyze. And I'm like, does it kill them or does it paralyze them? So we're not given confirmation of that, but it's a double-edged sword. It will paralyze and knock out the Blue Dragon in the process too. So you have to use it sparingly, right? It's not a power you just whip out and use whenever you want to, like the White Dragon. You got to use it sparingly. But I love the contrast that they're hidden up in the mountains, hidden away to try to protect this. They're still trying to protect the power, though. That's the thing. The White Dragon's village, Kija's village, were revering the power, and it seemed like they were very open about it, but they also guarded their village. They didn't let anybody come inside, and if they did come inside, they were prisoners, right? They were like, no. Unless, they married into the village, and then they just never left. With this village, they very much are like, no, we don't want to admit that we have the power hidden, but they're still protecting it. That's the thing. They're still protecting the power, even though they're afraid of it. So there's that. They obviously know that it's important and that they're protecting it, but they are also scared of it too, which is interesting. I like the concept that, and I'm assuming this is real, they didn't just make this up to protect the Blue Dragon, the concept that if you're unmarried, you have to wear the mask. But I wonder if that's entirely true, or if it's just put on to help protect the Blue Dragon. It would make sense if it's a cultural thing where their culture's like, if you're not married, you wear the mask, but if you are, then you can take it off. And so I wonder if that's actually a cultural thing in their village, or if they're just kind of saying that and going along with it and doing it to protect the Blue Dragon. I don't know. I don't know. I like that he adorns his mask, the Blue Dragon does, with the hair to mimic Ao, the old blue dragon. Oh man. Oh, ow. His backstory, it's so tragic. And it's hard because, well, one, so again, we established that you don't have to be, the blue dragon doesn't have to be son to daughter or whatever. It can be passed down just within the village. So it can be just a random person. But the idea that his mom, after she had him and realized and saw his eyes and realized that he was the next dragon, she killed herself. That's awful, because she probably saw how Al was treated in the village and what Al's life was like, and she was like, nope, and just killed herself. That's horrible. And we don't know who the father is. The father either died or isn't there. But the title of the episode, Blindfolded Dragon, it makes all the more sense. But the idea that they give him a mask, there's no holes in the mask. It basically, he's blind, but his eyes let him see beyond it. He has like this like X-ray vision almost to see further and further. But it's so sad that they say that they just left him with Al being like, well, here's the new blue dragon that's going to take your... And it's no wonder that he was so bitter, because part of it was like, this little kid's going to start sucking away, leeching away your power slowly and slowly. But when he started laughing at the end, saying that he was happy the power was gone because he could be human. Oh, that was tragic. That was awful. And they put the mask over the little kid's eyes in this moment to shield his face. So again, I wonder if it's cultural or if they're really just hiding the blue dragon so that they can't find him. But the white dragon knows that he's there. So another thing is that this village kind of plays ignorant to the whole idea of I'm going to get to Hawk here in a second. The village plays ignorant to the whole blue dragon powers, and they clearly think it's a curse and they're afraid of the power, but then they don't want anybody to get it. So there's, that's interesting. I love the part where Hawk like opens up the shirt and the little bubble says, a little fan service for you today. It's like the show is trying to say, here's a little humor now because it's about to get dark and depressing in a minute. That's great. That's great. And Yoon's just like, what are you even doing? But yeah, so I like that this village, though, in contrast to Kija's village was very much like, oh, we're not having guests. We're going to take you prisoner if you invade our village. No. Even though in the end they were very nice. This village is very welcoming. They're like, yeah, you can come here and stay here, but we don't have anything for you. So they present themselves the exact opposite of Kija's village. It's very bare bones, basic. We don't have anything frivolous or special for you, but we'll let you stay here. And so, yeah, but he's very ominous, and he's like, watch yourself, girl. And it's like, As soon as he said that, I was like, well, that's creepy. She's probably going to get hit on or tried to be attacked by or assaulted by someone in this creepy cave dwelling, which she is. Thank goodness the blue dragon shows up to save her. And Hawk is just like, what is going on? So, yeah, I like that they stay in these little drab quarters. And Kija the whole time, Kija is struggling. I'm going to be very curious to see Kija and the Blue Dragon's interactions, because Kija is reverent of the dragon's blood. Kija thinks it's like fate. It's great. The blood has drawn me to you. I'm here to serve you. Why aren't all the other dragons just lining up to serve you as well? And for the Blue Dragon, I don't think he knows much about the mythology. So he just knows he has a power and it's a curse, but he doesn't realize exactly what's entailed with it. So that's going to be really interesting for him to hear from Yona and from Kija all about this backstory. He's kind of in the dark like we are as the audience. He just knows there's a power, I love in the background Kija and Hawk just fighting. Kija and Hawk, their dynamic is so great. I love it in this series because they're just back and forth with each other. And Kija just flirting with Yona, and Hawk's just like, and then when Yona's like, I want you, and Hawk's just like, she doesn't even know what she's saying. But Yoon, I get so much joy out of Yoon in this, where he's just so excited to make a map, and he's like, find the treasure, and there's butterflies everywhere in the background. Yoon is so wonderful. I'm very curious to see how the Blue Dragon interacts with Hawk. I feel like the Blue Dragon and Hawk will get along better than Kija and Hawk, because the Blue Dragon will be like, okay. And Hawk will be just like, it's fine. But yeah, we have this conversation start up with Kija, and I love that they do the little thing and they're very close to the squirrel. I love that we have the little video game maze, like the Nintendo game. It's great. I love it. So yeah, Kija makes the point, he's like, why won't the blue dragon come out? He must know that I'm here. I like that Kija's like, I'm here. Shouldn't he be attracted to the other dragons? Shouldn't he know the draw to it? The blue dragon does not. He doesn't know the history because Ao, I'm sure, didn't really tell him. Maybe Ao didn't really even know. He just thought his power was a curse. They know that they're a blue dragon and that they have this power and that they have to protect the village, but that's pretty much it. I don't know. And Yona suggests that maybe they should just, maybe he doesn't want to come out. And Kija's like, no, we can't give up. And he makes the point. He's like, the blue dragon's similar to me. We've come from a long line. He has to be waiting for you. You're, for you, a master who needs him. And that's interesting because Ao and the blue dragon in the flashbacks, they don't seem to be waiting on her. They don't seem to be waiting on a king or anything. They just seem to be kind of tortured by the idea that they have this power. Whereas Kija spent his whole life just like yearning, like his ancestors before him, yearning for Yona to show up. So I think it's pretty obvious at this point why Iksu sent them to the White Dragon first, because he's the most loyal. The White Dragon is the most loyal to the cause because he's been trained his whole life to be loyal to the cause, right? And then we had that shot of the claw marking his back. And so I'm wondering if, because in the flashback, the White Dragon that's looking out the window, his father or whoever, the one before him, had the claw still. So I wonder if by scraping Kija's back, he passed on the power. I wonder if that's how it worked, because they established that once the power transfers, the old user no longer has it. And it seems like they die very shortly after that, right? So I wonder if Kija's father or the White Dragon before him clawed his back, passed on the claw to him, and then died shortly thereafter. Because it seems like once Al loses his sight completely and is human again, then he dies shortly after, which is so sad. So freaking sad. And so he says that the blue dragon meets you, I'm sure he'll want to follow you. And, which is true, the blue dragon's like, I touched this girl's hand and felt things. Right? But Yona makes a very good point. I'm glad Yona finally says it outright. She's like, Kija, I'm glad you want to follow me, but I am not Hiryu. I'm not the king. She's like, and he's like, well, I know you aren't, but he's like, I thought it was you. Well, I'm pretty sure she's like, I'm not King Hiryu. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure you're like either the reincarnation of him or you're his descendant. I'm pretty sure. But she's like, I'm not Hiryu, but I still want you to follow me. I still want you to be with me. And she's like, I'm sorry I'm being selfish, but I need you to help me. And he's like, it's fine. And I love anytime he's like, oh, a heart. And he's like, I'm not worthy. And Hawk's like, I hate this so much. I feel for Hawk because Hawk, my dude, he is going to be struggling on the struggle bus, having these 4 dragons who clearly want Yona. And he's like, what can I do? Why is this like this? I don't understand. I like that Yoon gets a sense of dread, and Hawk does too, that something feels bad about this place. I don't know why the squirrel would lead her to this creepy guy unless the squirrel was trying to lead her to the blue dragon and this creepy guy just happened to show up. As soon as the creepy guy, anytime you see a character and you can't see their face, instant suspiciousness. Instant suspiciousness, stranger danger, get away, Yona, don't do it. But what choice did she really have? She couldn't really run anywhere. She's like, well, girl, you too trusting. You too trusting. But then it makes sense that the blue dragon just shows up and the guy runs away because he knows the power. The village knows the power that the blue dragon has. And the bells, the damn bells hanging from his little horn, and his horn has grown. It's gone from cat ears, the little cat ears as a kid, to the same mask that he's basically wearing the same mask that Al wore, and he's put the hair on top of it to look like Al. Aww. And I like that he's like all bandaged up with his little turtle. His clothing suggests like symbolically that he's very guarded, like he's very closed up, but he has the bells in honor of Al. Oh my gosh. Their backstory, it almost made me tear up. I was like, this is so sad. Oh, but I love that she, despite the blue dragon thinking that he's, alone and distant, she's like, he felt gentle and warm. It's like, oh. I really think I'm going to like the blue dragon. Just his backstory. Oh my gosh. And he's so soft-spoken. Yeah. And then he just runs away. But it makes sense because he has a squirrel as his friend. He runs away because he's been alone all his life, and Ao told him that he'd never make friends. And that's so sad. I'm like, he's like, you will never make friends. No, you don't have friends. And the squirrel like taps his hand. But yeah, it's just, it's so sad because you know where Ao's coming from. You know where Ao is coming from because Ao's probably grown up his whole life alone, and the village has just made up rumors and been so cruel to him. And so he thinks there's no chance for him. He never had friends. No one cared about him. He was just, it reminds me a lot of Fruits Basket. I've read the manga years ago and I watched the original series. It reminds me a bit of Fruits Basket where Kyo has the power of the cat curse, and it's like a curse. And people are scared of him because of it, and he doesn't think he can make any genuine friends because of that curse that he has. It reminds me a lot of that. And so, of course, Ao, he's trying to protect the blue dragon by keeping him safe with him, but he's afraid that if he tells him, yeah, you can go out and make friends, that they're going to take advantage of him, and he's going to end up getting his heart broken, like Ao's probably was. And so you get why Ao's doing it, but it's so harsh. And so in the flashback here, so 18 years ago, okay, so I kept thinking it was further back than it was. So 18 years ago, so the blue dragon is 18. So he's a little bit younger than Kija and a little bit older than Yona. Okay, and a little bit older than Hawk. The child possesses the blue dragon's eyes, and it will become the next one. And you see the little mark on his face. And then the mother killed herself. So they don't really know who the father is. They just say we're going to take him to the previous generation. That's the rule. And he has a little, but he's so damn cute. And then they put the mask over him before the power awakened. So when he was born, the power hadn't awakened yet, but they put the mask over him so that he couldn't see. That's so sad because they basically just dropped off this baby to Ao and were like, here you go. Find something to do with him. And his first memories of darkness. That's so sad. So the question is, can he control the power now? Or is it still uncontrollable? Does it work on the dragons or are they immune to it? That's the question. So it'd be cool if the power works on everybody except a dragon. So if his power works on everyone other than a dragon, and then maybe his power works on everybody except another dragon, that could be. Because that would be a way for them to like gauge whether or not he can control it, and that's how he could work to control that power so that he could keep the mask off. I don't know. That's interesting. I like the idea that we have like the arm, the eyes, it's like, and we know the green dragon is the legs. It's like a different part it's like each body part is connected to the dragon, and like Yona's the heart and the fire within. It's like, it's so cool. But yeah, it's so sad all the kids are scared of him because they think that his power is gonna like hurt them. And then they send him to Ao, who's just grown up with this power too and is just bitter and has felt alone because of it. And the thing of it is at the very end, Ao regrets it because he's like, I was alone my whole life and I hated it. And I hated being not human. And he's like, what I've done is the same thing to you that was done to me. He's like, I've left you alone. And then he apologizes for him at the end of it. It's like, oh. It's like, it's so damn sad. So sad. And yeah, and you can just tell, I have a soft spot for like the older characters and stories that are like, that grow frail and are aware of it. Like they're aging characters and they're aware that they're aging and they try to like work through it. But they have like the young kid with them to like remind them of their youth and remind them that life goes on and things like that. Like I'm a sucker for that storyline and that character trope. And this Ao is like, oh my gosh, he's just, and when he tells the blue dragon the story about them spreading the rumors that you'd turn to stone if you watched him, like you can just see in his eyes, you can see like the pain and the weariness. He's like, it's just a rumor, but the power does paralyze the nerves of people who see them. But he doesn't have to wear the mask now because he's going blind, and it can even paralyze their hearts. So it is a creepy power. It's very creepy, but that gives me some excitement and interest to see how, because obviously the blue dragon can probably defend himself with a sword, but I'm like, when worse comes to worse and they are in a bind, is he going to use the power? And when's he going to do it? That's the exciting part. I'm like, okay, we've established this power is very strong. You can only use it like once before you paralyze yourself for a while. So you only use it once before you knock yourself out. So it's going to be like a do or die situation when he uses it. And I'm like, It's just set up. It's set up for a payoff later, explaining this power, which I'm really excited about. But poor Al, whenever the blue dragon starts to cry, he's like, stop crying. He's like trying to make him tough because, and that's the thing. He's trying to make him tough, but you know on the inside that Al's probably like cried so much about his power and viewing it as a curse. Like he's trying to have the current blue dragon not go through the same thing he did, but inadvertently he kind of puts him through the same thing, and that's why he apologizes at the end. He says, I don't know what makes his power so legendary, but why does it cling to this village? Even if the blue dragon dies, the village produces a new one. And the villagers do nothing but spread stupid rumors. So it's so tragic because what it's suggesting is he's like, I can't get away from here. He's like, even if the blue dragon leaves and dies, this village produces another one. It never leaves here. And so it is tied to the village somehow. The power is tied to the village. But then he's like, the village has been producing blue dragons for generations after generations. But instead of doing like Kija's village and coming to accept the power and learn about it and revere it, they do the opposite. They just all shun away from that person. So he's like, what's the point? He's like, if you're born in this village over and over again, he's like, every blue dragon born in this village is doomed for a life of isolation and loneliness. And he's like, the village does nothing to help include the blue dragon into it. And so it's so tragic. He's like, nothing changes. And it's just this cycle of isolation. And it's so sad. You can tell he feels sad because he knows that this boy is going to go through the exact same thing he did. And then when Al sees that people are coming, that look in his eyes, he's just like, this kid knows and he's learning. He's like, and I got to go defend the village. And when he like trips and falls, I was like, I was like, oh my God, I couldn't. And he smacks the boy away, telling him not to touch him. Because he's just growing weaker and weaker because the power's leaving him. It's so tragic. And then he's like, and he's very adamant not to use the eyes. He's like, if you use those eyes, it's a double-edged sword and they'll just come back. They'll keep coming after you for your power. People won't stop hating you. And so he didn't want him to go through that same thing. It's so tragic. It's so sad, damn it. And he's like, and the sad thing is that the sad thing is that they're sworn to protect the village, and they do protect the village with their eyes or with the sword. But after all that, after giving up their freedom and staying there and protecting the village doesn't reward them at all. The village still shuns them and treats them like monsters, even though they're protecting it. It's such the opposite of Kija, and it's so sad. And that point where the blue dragon says, well, if I learn to protect the village with a sword and I keep my eyes hidden, will that let me make friends? And that look on Al's face, like the gleam in his eye, and he's just like, no. And he tells that kid outright, he's like, of course not. And he doesn't yell it, he just says, of course not. You're not going to make friends. They're not going to treat you any different. It's so damn sad! And then at the end, when Al falls and he's storming away, but he holds out his hand, like, grab my hand. And earlier he said, don't touch me. But he lets the blue dragon grab his hand and hold it. So sad. Oh my God. But yeah, the saddest part is when he realizes he can't see anything anymore and the power's gone from him. And he says, I can finally die because I don't have the power anymore. And saying his body is becoming paralyzed and he's been released. And I am human. Because yeah, that's the crazy thing about this whole thing is that these dragons, it's like there's a part of them that are tied to this deity, and there's part of them that have no free will, the blood inside of them is drawn to Yona, and they're drawn to a king, and they have this power. They have no control over their own lives. But then there's another part of them that does. So it's kind of like this tricky, like, tug of war. Like, how do they control it? And it seems like Kija's self-aware of the fact that he's drawn to Yona, but Kija also seems like he's pretty aware that he does have a little bit of autonomy himself. And the blue dragon has no clue about the whole dragon's blood thing, other than it's gave him this power of this crazy sight. But that's so crazy that that a lot of the previous generations, in Ao's case, he longed to be rid of that power. He wanted to be human again, so that he wouldn't have any ties like that. And the bells that the blue dragon finds come from the bandits. And the fact that Ao didn't even notice them, he's like, when'd you get those bells? And he's like, oh, I like the sound of them. Like, you wonder if he put them on, if Ao realizes he put them on to, like, walk with him so that he'd know. But then, yeah, him dying, oh my gosh. I know where you are, even though I can't see you. Oh my gosh. And then I love in that moment, he like has his mask in his hand and he like looks around and he's like, look, see, you can see me. You'll know where I am. And he's so happy right as Ao dies. And he sees him crying, and I'm sorry, but that moment where he's like, I'm sorry for leaving you alone. Because then he dies. He leaves him alone. And then, oh my gosh, because he falls. He's like, don't leave me. Let's talk about something else. But I'm stupid and I can't think of anything to say. That little kid being like, I don't know anything else to say. And then he like dies, saying you have to talk. And then it cuts to him being all alone. He just wants to hear his voice. Oh my gosh, that's so tragic. He said he's finally dead. He lasted longer than the others. Because here's the thing. And the thing of it is that since this village views the blue dragon as a curse, but they don't do anything about it, that I'm sure that the previous blue dragons, they probably killed themselves because they just couldn't handle it anymore. And then the power passed on to the next generation. It never left the village. And I'm sure at some point the village just finally accepted it, like, well, there will be somebody in our village cursed, born with a curse, and there's nothing we can do about it. But it sucks so much because it's like, okay, you can't figure out something to do to like make their lives better. Instead, you just curse them as monsters and isolate them. Yeah. But when you think about it, you're like, Ao probably lived as long as he did because he wanted to protect the current blue dragon. And he kind of became like a father figure to him. And it's so damn sad. And then I'm assuming at some point along the way, he met the squirrel and the squirrel became his friend. Maybe we'll see that in the next episode. But yeah, him going to protect the village by basically just knocking out everyone and then taking out his eyes and then saying, I'm sorry, Ao. But I had to. This power is never supposed to be used. And it's funny because the mask as it is, not the one he currently has with the horns, but the old mask kind of looks like the squirrel. This episode was so good. I loved this episode so much. The blue dragon, I love Kija. I love him to pieces. I love him in Hawk's dynamic and everything, but I want to like give the blue dragon the biggest hug in the world. Don't tell me his name. I'm sure we're going to find out next episode. But maybe he doesn't have a name. Oh no, what if he doesn't have a name? They never call him Ao never called him by his name. Oh. Anyway, I'm really excited to see this episode and the next episode, episode 13, but I have a feeling that the blue dragon looks like an absolute cinnamon bun, and I have a feeling I'm really going to enjoy him being added to the party. It's going to be a so different dynamic, but I can't wait. So in the meantime, I'm curious to know your thoughts down below. This episode had my heart. I feel so sorry for Ao. So sorry for our blue dragon. I just want them to get him out of that cursed village. The village is cursed. I want him to get them out of here and like let them go on the journey with him. But in the meantime, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll be back next week with episode 13 of Yona of the Dawn. Bye.